and instructor with Terrapin, and it's good to have you back for another webinar. Today, we have a really interesting subject, one that hits a home, with me when it comes to training, but also with technology. And this goes along with our guest speaker, Andii Stanley from Know Before, is joining us today. And Andii, thank you for joining us. Well, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Joe, for inviting me. It's a pleasure. So, my name's Andii. I am a channel platform specialist at Know. So, I am just talking about security awareness and what we do with it all day, every day. I've been in IT field for over 10 years now, and over 5 years of that with Know. I love training. I have a education background, and I've just always been very interested in knowledge and trying to stop the bad guys. I'm a little bit of a, want to be superhero sometimes. I think all of us 90s kids were. But I really love our Inside Man series at Know. I love people who are engaged in stopping the bad guys, even when it's on Facebook or LinkedIn, shiny things. And my favorite dislike is, of course, the scammers.
Well, you're in good company there. That's for sure. Well, thanks again for being with us. And I'm going to go ahead, as we normally do. I'm going to go ahead and turn my camera off so you guys aren't distracted by my ugly mug here, and we can focus on our presentation that Andii and I have been discussing for a few weeks about, the risk assessment when it comes to things security, and specifically, Know Before is one of the companies that we've worked with that provides training and also a risk analysis. And we'll talk a little bit about what that means near the end and how that's performed. Primarily, we've talked about security in the past, and this is a slide that you may have seen before about, why do these people do these things? Why do they hack into things? They send out these, you know, you have a long lost relative from Nigeria, or hey, you can pay me in gift cards and things like that. This was a slide that we had prepared a while back, and I think Andii, you had seen this too because you had joined in with that webinar about why hackers
Yeah.
do what they do. It's very, very interesting. What in some of the analysis and things that you've seen, what are some of the most common threats that come in? And of course, we're talking about email is the biggest one where threats come in. What are some of the biggest things that you've seen happen and that people have been goofed by, and tricked?
Absolutely. And that's a fantastic question because everybody still thinks of hacking, as somebody in a dark room typing away at a keyboard, hoodie on, lines of matrix code going around them, and that's simply not what it is anymore. A lot of times it's just groups of office workers, in a lot of cases. And so types of scams that we're really seeing to be some of the most prevalent and fallen for, and that's a really key point. They may not be the most commonly happening, but they are some of the ones that I see the most commonly fallen for are those gift card scams. They're usually looking for a fairly small dollar amount in this, what you would consider a hacker looking for, 200, 300, $500, maybe 1,000. And they're typically looking for some kind of gift card like Apple or Amazon or any of those types of places. And they're hoping that they're going to find a user who is just trying to do the right thing
Hmm.
and do what their boss is asking them to do, and go out and do this right away because they don't want to bother anybody. And that's just what they do. And a lot of times these are very successful. And unfortunately, it is usually the user that is most impacted by that because they've either used their personal card or some other bit of their own personal information has been compromised. And it's really not just email either. We are seeing these types of attacks happening through other forms communication. Um, SMS text messaging is a big vector right now
Yeah.
when it comes to these types of attacks. I would say probably number two against phishing, where before it would have probably been, voice calls were more common than text messaging phishing, but now with the availability of everybody having their mobile phones, somewhere online, they get these numbers, they do a little bit of searching, and most can be done by a program
Right.
to correlate you with a business and then see what they can get.
So, but now this is something that only really affects big companies. They're not really targeting the small businesses and going, "Oh, that's a small business. There's not really anything really to get from them. I'm going to target this large law firm or this large company." Is that how they think on that?
Absolutely not. So, unfortunately, they look at large companies as challenges, and they know that they have every layer possible. Regulatory agencies are requiring a lot of different layers to be put in place, specifically things like MFA and VPN, and in some cases, security awareness training. So, by knowing that a lot of these organizations already have a really strong security culture going, both on the hardware and software side, and then also on the user level, they're not going to fight that. That's like this going back to hard hacking. Nobody wants to do that anymore. When instead, you could make that same amount of money, might take a little bit more action necessarily,
Mhm.
but a lot less time by just throwing that cast net out and seeing what you catch. I would rather, as a hacker, if I was a hacker, I would rather send out 500 emails to small organizations randomly dotted around there where I know that maybe it's a busy time for them or they're understaffed, there could be news about it, then try to hit one of the big guys like Amazon or Apple, or even, state local governments, because those are starting to get a lot more aware now.
So when we talk about hackers that are doing this type of thing, and they're not necessarily targeting the larger, but the smaller because they know that they have fewer resources or security measures in play. I mean, the returns on that are going to be smaller. So are they individually saying, "Okay, I'm going to hack this small company today," or is there a more automated process to how they do this, and it's more indiscriminate versus maybe a specific target?
Well, yeah, I mean, honestly, when you're looking at these smaller organizations, to be able to get a district A, buy a list of email aliases. It is so easy and so cheap, and they don't even have to do it on the dark web. This is the kind of stuff that somebody can pay $100 somewhere and get some kind of packaged ransomware or malware, and buy some kind of marketing list and send out an automated just rash of emails to a large spread and see what sticks. And a lot of times, smaller organizations, they know that users that maybe have a title like office manager or yeah, the accounting departments, they're usually really stretched thin. And so everybody may not be on their guard, and it's going to be easier for them to get that in. And so now when they cast that net, they've got an investment of maybe $500 into this entire scam. And if just three responses come back, they've now, with $500 each, they're now, $1,000 profit. And they can keep going and doing this. So that's where we really see a lot of the biggest challenges happening, and some of the most destructive, because an attack like that on an organization that maybe is trusted in an area, has a small family staff, or is just can't afford to lose
Mhm.
$5,000 that week.
Yeah. Well, and for
All
many
of
of
those
our
are major
smaller clients,
considerations.
that could make or break them.
Absolutely. It
Yeah.
would make or break me. So I understand that completely. Most of us do.
Yeah. I really like that. This was an interesting slide that you shared with us, talking about the weakest link in security. We hate to admit that we are a weak link in this, but ultimately, even with the best countermeasures in place to help protect us, antivirus and email filtering and et cetera, you can have a whole stack of different things that are there to protect us from bad malicious websites and the emails and et cetera. How does it come in that we're still the weakest link in all of this, despite having all these different things that are in place to help protect us from getting taken advantage of?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you compare it to home security, let's say you have, a really good lock on your door. You've got a security system that's got a cellular backup. You've got signs posted. You've got a large dog that has a loud bark, but somebody knocks on your door and you open it. And now all of that is gone. Their
Hmm.
awareness and the human element really starts to come in, because if you're not educating the person at that door who can physically take down every single piece of that by simply, in this case, clicking on something, then they're not going to know the red flags to look for through the keyhole to say, I'm not opening my door for this person.
Interesting. Very interesting. And a lot of
Hmm.
the examples that we've had to deal with as a technology company and helping clients, many of I would say the lion's share of responses and threats, threat vectors, however you want to refer to them, come into play. I would say probably 90% or even higher are usually through email. And it could be an attachment, but more times than not, it's a
Hmm.
link in the email that they're supposed to use. And just like you said, they open the door, they'll click on the link. Now, when they click on that link, it may go to a website that is trusted. So, for example, it might go to OneDrive, it might go to Dropbox, it might go to Adobe's cloud services, or maybe a website that has hosted a file or something that's not known to be malicious. So now you're no longer under your umbrella. You've now reached out to the outside. You're on this website, and you could open up a document that will then have another link inside of it, which will then take you to a malicious site or a site designed to look like something else. Oh, you need to enter in your email and password so that you can get this encrypted document that so and so sent to you that
Hmm.
maybe you haven't worked with in years, but you're like, oh, they may have sent me something, and they're letting me know that we're going to be doing work together and give me a heads up on the work, and so on and so forth. And so then you enter in your email address. And we've talked about this in the previous webinar too, and I've shown the code behind it. You enter in your email address, you enter in your password, and then a screen comes up and says, oh, I'm sorry, incorrect password.
Hmm.
Yeah, it wasn't
Yep.
incorrect. They're just
And
scraping
that's,
it out.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is, and it's so interesting too, because when you think, and some of the scams that I've seen really really prevalent now are through Google. So Gmail, Drive, anybody can sign up for a Gmail account. It's usually the most prevalent of the
Yeah.
free accounts, and they can also get, so much storage with that. And Alphabet, Google, they can't keep up with scanning every single file that comes into their system. There's things that are there, and it macro, and people forget that macros can do so much damage
Yeah.
sometimes, and they're like, well, it's not it's not an exe file or anything like that. It's just an XLS. What's this
Right.
M? And I don't know what macros are, and I just click it. Been there, done that. Luckily not a malicious link, but you know, there's just so many different paths, and ultimately it all boils down into social engineering and phishing.
So it's
So,
interesting
they
you
may start the process. Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting you bring that up because that was another slide that you had. I'll go ahead and share it here. That
Oh, yeah.
talks about using socially engineered techniques that basically take these email scams that used to go around, and it brings them up to the next level of duping people
Mhm.
again to volunteer information so that that way the hacker doesn't have to go through the defenses. You walk outside the defense and volunteer the information. That's why it's so genius on how that works.
Exactly. All of us wanna be helpful. We don't wanna cause problems, especially in business. We wanna keep the business going, and when you get a request from information from somebody who's a trusted source, you don't necessarily know if they've been compromised, and that's another major vector right now, is the business email compromise. I
Yeah.
cannot tell you how many times I've had somebody email me back on something I've sent out before, where they had no idea they were compromised, and they could be compromised for weeks, sending out the emails, none the wiser. They're getting past every single piece of hardware and software you could have in place because it's a legitimate sender. Unless this has been identified, it's not going to be stopped. But they do have red flags, and that's what you want to look out for and make sure that you're recognizing, okay, your users they know what they're looking for. And just because it's coming from a trusted source, if it's out of the ordinary, like an attachment or a link, or has no reference whatsoever to the original email, stop and think. That's not right.
So there's an example I had used in one of our security presentations we did a while back. This is where somebody got an email, and in the email there was someone of the management that was requesting a copy of all the W-2 forms. And so the assistant
Mhm.
replied back to them, sent them a copy of all the W-2s as they requested. And then they replied back and said, no, I don't need those. I need the ones with all the details in it. Because the ones they had sent were the W-2s that had certain information redacted or missing. For example, like the social security numbers and some other things. It was like a simplified version. And so, the assistant was like, well, I would have to scan all those in. That's going to take a while. So she then goes back to their multifunction device and began scanning in all copies of the W-2 forms for all the employees. While the assistant is back there, the manager, whom she thought she was emailing, happens to walk by and sees the assistant and is like, "Well, what are you doing?" And they said, "Well, I'm scanning all the W-2s like you requested." He's like, "I didn't request that." So, as you know where this is going, this is a business email compromise. The email that they
Mhm.
had received was designed to make it look like it was coming from the manager, but in closer evaluation, it was not. Because in emails, you can have a facade in front of the actual real email. It can say whatever it wants to, but the email address behind it is somewhere completely different. Could be a Yahoo or a Gmail address. I've even seen them as sophisticated where they will create a domain that looks almost identical to the real domain, but it has one character off. But the character that's off is engineered in a way that it's easily overlooked. So you don't recognize
Mhm.
that it's a different domain name. I had this happen with an attorney who was dealing with someone in the federal government, and their particular email address was spoofed in a way with a domain that looked almost identical. The attachment in the email had the official seal and everything. It was very, very well done. Engineered specifically. It was
Those are
specifically
that is
engineered.
well engineered. Yes.
Yeah, it was very, very well
And
engineered. But, that one
that's an
was unique,
interesting point
because it was
too.
working on, it was close to, nearly $2 million in funds. That's different. But we were talking a lot of times these attacks, they're looking for $500 here, $5,000 there in these smaller business areas. What did you say? The reason they do that is why? I forgot what you had mentioned on that.
So it's you're casting the net wider. You're able to cover more ground, take care of getting this done because it's so much cheaper. It's a $500 investment for, you send out 50 emails, 3 bite. I've now got $1,000 in profit.
Right.
And it just takes so much less time to do it. Whereas like that particular example that you brought up, that would take a lot. You have to pay to register the domain, you have to find the domain, you have to pay for the services attached to it, the email that's associated to it, plus whatever you may have to do to work with somebody to craft that email to look that well. How much money and time are you investing into that? Yeah, it's going to have a really good payoff, but in the long are mostly just businesses that are run on foreign soil that are just churning out as many as they can get as possible. It is 100% quantity, not quality.
Very interesting. And I think you had mentioned before, a lot of times, like we said, this is not a person necessarily. They'll create a macro or a botnet to do this
Mhm.
automatically and just do it. It's on automatic. So it's indiscriminate on who they're
Absolutely.
picking to do. But at the same time,
And hard to
I have seen, yeah, I have seen where law firms are targeted based on the individuals that are listed on their website. So so
absolutely.
let's say that your CEO, your CFO are all listed on your website with their names. Then these socially engineered or spear phishing emails are designed to emulate those particular people. So, for example, having something from the CFO going to someone who works in the accounting office or another manager somewhere. Um, and I noticed that someone in our chat had mentioned that they're targeting even new attorneys that are joining the firm not long after they're joined. Absolutely, and that's
Oh,
highly
yes.
lucrative because they don't necessarily know everybody in the firm, and maybe like, oh well, maybe that's just not a person I've met yet. So
And they're also
sneaky,
usually a little scared. Um, you're a new employee in a firm, especially as a new attorney. It's a scary world. You pass the bar, you're going out there, you're paying your dues, trying to get somewhere with it. And it's a scary time, and you want to do really good, and you don't want to rock
yeah,
the boat, and you want a good employee, but you just may not know everything yet. And that's what they're looking for. These scammers love LinkedIn. LinkedIn is their number one source for information. And then from LinkedIn, they can start looking and scrubbing the other areas of social media. They can look at your Twitters, they can look at Facebook, they look at Instagram. I've seen them go on WhatsApp and start talking to people. If it's a way that they can contact you, they absolutely will. I mean, you back to some of the biggest scams that are out there is, hey, we've been trying to reach you about your extended warranty. They find you no matter where you are. So this
absolutely.
is the same thing. They'll go through,
So
and it's giving them fodder,
yeah, it is,
and it's
it is.
unavoidable too.
So the threat or the risk, I should say, is very real, whether you're a solo practitioner or you're a firm of hundreds, or a company that works
Hmm.
in one office, or you're spread out all over the place in multi offices. There's a real risk there that, I'll be honest, a lot of us are kind of naive about. It's one of those things where if I'm not affected by it, I tend to kind of put it off and not think about it or give it due risk analysis or thought about what to
Hmm.
do. So one of the things that I appreciate that your service offers is that educational benefit. And there's also the reporting, but I really like the educational benefit. So just to kind of talk about how you approach on
Hmm.
this, and we've seen a number of our clients take advantage of this, is one, you don't know who your riskiest people are in the firm. Maybe it might be because of, if it's really bad, who clicked on something, they downloaded a virus or some type of, weird program or something. But that's only if some type of technical thing gets generated or a support ticket and you track it back to a particular person or computer. But outside of
Right.
that, you may not know who are your riskiest people. What are the riskiest things that people are falling for? And that's one of the things I liked about your service is you provide a service that will send out, let's be honest about what they are. They are emails designed to look like the common types of spam, phishing, spear phishing messages, links, attachments that are out there. And people, they get delivered to individuals in the organization, and it's not like where you go, hey, here's one email, I'm going to send it to everybody. Maybe the first three people they get caught, but everyone else gets catches wind of it. Hey, there's like this phishing email going around the office, don't click on it. But instead,
Yep.
I like how your service will send different types of these, I'll call them training emails to individuals. So they're not all the
Hmm.
same. They're almost unique to the individual. And if they
And it
click
is.
on these things,
It is.
yeah, they get a notice. Hey, this was a
Hmm.
training, this was a test. You clicked on something. We want to give you a little reminder about this. and it provides them instant training on it. Now, it's not like, hey, red flags, you're alerted, you're going to get, a pink slip, or there's, two people are going to come to your office and they're going to have a meeting with you and you have to sit down and go through a 1 hour training. We're not looking to call people out, but there is nothing better than when you've made an oops and learning from that to know, oh, you know what? This is something you don't click on, and to remember it. And again, not to call people out, but it's that type of training. It's kind of on demand type of training. Am I right?
Absolutely. And as a user myself, I would much rather know through a simulated phishing test that I would be susceptible to fall for something than be the one with the target on my back when I take a company down, because that does happen.
Yeah,
And unfortunately, even for users, for organizations, it doesn't matter who you are now. With these types of attacks, there is litigation risk that comes into play as well, especially when data starts to become compromised,
right.
livelihoods are compromised, employees are fired. But by doing simulated phishing, you're giving those users the ability to test their skills in a safe environment, typically at their skill level, with a template that's going to work specifically for them with very little work behind it, because we're being able to see what's out there. We're adding in new templates all the time. Our customers are adding new templates in all the time to show actually what's out there, using the bad guys' own stuff back against them to help the users be aware. It's much easier to fight against something when you know what it looks like. And
Absolutely.
by being able, that's it. There's the social engineering red flags. By being able to test them frequently enough that they remember it, they can keep those skills sharp, and also by providing immediate feedback on their exact failure point, which it is a failure point, but it's not a bad failure. I wish I had a better word for that. I really, really do. I'm still working years later. But by giving them that feedback to show them exactly what they missed, that user is now prepared to go forward and potentially not fall for that again. But if they do, you now know, and you can then address that with a different style of training. Not everybody learns exactly the same way. Not everybody's going to have their aha moment at the same exact time. So by being able to do this type of testing, you can really really streamline the training process, make it a lot more efficient, especially in industries like legal, where you have a lot of continuing education that your attorneys may have to be doing at the same time, or medical. That's it's another one where there's just constant education. By being able to do this in smaller chunks, by giving
And
them immediate feedback, by testing
yeah,
those skills,
I
you create
really
a
like that.
huge human firewall.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
really like that. Because I've been doing training for years, and there is a place for getting everybody together, and we're going to have a class or an update on certain things. But that's only good
Mhm.
at that time. And then between that time and when you do your next one, a lot of things can change. And there may be new people that come in that may not go through that same training until that time. So having this in place provides you with that ongoing training. At the same time, for those who work, as the CIO, uh, and whatnot, and different management type positions, this will give you reporting on, you know, again, we're not trying to call people out, but who are the risky players and what type of risks are they falling for, so that we can provide better training. Or maybe there's something that we need to fine tune on an IT side that can help with these things. But those are all things you wouldn't know without the metrics or reporting that come from the service that you offer. And that also goes along the lines you talked about insurance and cyber insurance. A lot, many of them are including line items now that will say, do you provide some type of testing? Do you provide some type of
Mhm.
training? All of those, answering yes to those types of questions mean that you have a lower premium because you are a lower risk.
Yep.
So there's lots of benefits, and very, very few disadvantages. I think maybe the one disadvantage is, if I did click on one of these, it does make me feel a little embarrassed that I did it. But again, it's not being announced to anybody and everybody. And at the same time,
Correct.
it does take time, and taking time out of our schedule to do something, especially training when we've made oops on something, is not, something we enjoy doing. Uh, I think I had made the expression before. It's a lot like when you get a speeding ticket and you hem and haw about it,
Mhm.
and it's like, well, at the end of the day, I was going too fast. It just
Exactly.
so we don't want to use it as a means to browbeat anybody. At the center of all this is keeping our clients and their clients' data safe so that no one has to file an insurance claim or make a statement about data that was breached, or some other type of PR event that is much, much worse in having to mitigate versus having a follow-up on a training and providing handouts like we have right here, which I just wanted to remind everybody, if you're interested in having a copy of this handout from Know Before, please let us know, and we'll be happy to follow up with you and provide that to you. You can, as you know, you can email us, info@terrapintechnology.com, and feel free to visit Know Before at their website if you have questions about the services that they offer, or like more information about that. Let us know that too. We can put you in touch with them, and you can have conversations about risk analysis and training and the templates that Andii talked about, from the experts, just like Andii, to find out more about that. Andii, thank you
Maybe
so
even
much for
MLB.
joining us and sharing your expertise on this very, very important subject. We thoroughly enjoyed it.
Absolutely. This was fantastic. Thank you so much for having me. And I really look forward to any questions that you guys may have. Anything that's needed, just let me know. I have seen it all at this point.
And it's a constantly changing environment, so we can't rest on our laurels.
That
It
it
will
is.
always be changing, and I'm
There'll
sure
be
we'll be
something new
having an
next week.
update. Yeah, very good.
Exactly.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. And again, if you would like to have more information, feel free to drop me an email or the info@terrapintechnology.com, and we'll make sure to get you that handout or any other information you need. Thanks a lot, everybody. Have a good day.